In this next section, we're going to talk about adding more questions and deleting questions from the quiz. And for this one, we're going to be using 3 of our files. So from your course EN folder, you want to have out the articles.json, the blocks.json, and the components.json. And for us to be able to add more questions and also delete questions, we have to talk a little bit about the IDs and parent IDs. So we're going to start with the articles.json. So the articles.json is basically going to be like our page itself that all of the quiz questions are on. And then each of the quiz questions is in its own block. And then the quiz question itself with all the answers and whatnot is the component that's on there. So what you're going to notice is if you take a look at the ID for the articles.json, you can see that this ID is named A15. So if we go to look at the blocks, which blocks are inside of the article, we can see that the parent ID of this block here is A15. So that means it's nested inside of this article here. And then we can see of this block here, the ID is B70. So if we go to components, we can see our first component here is paired up with B70, and it has its own unique ID for itself, and that's C90. So in order for us to create more questions, we have to have a block with that question. We don't need to add any more articles because the page is an article itself, but each question is going to be within a block, so we have to create a new block. In order to do that, let's go to our blocks.json and create a new block that we can create a new question component to put into. For this, what we want to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom of the blocks.json, and this is kind of like putting a puzzle together, and you want to make sure in this puzzle that there's basically no errors. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, what I'm looking for is the ID that matches an ID in my components. So if I scroll down to, if I go into my components.json and scroll down to the bottom where the last question is here, so we can see that this is the assessment results, and we don't want that, and we don't want to know what the parent ID for that is right now. We want to find our last question because we want to insert a question after our last question. So we can see our last question here, and our last question's parent ID is B106. So it's kind of like a matching game. We want to find B106 for our block. So if we go into here, we can see at the end here we have B106, so that's exactly what we're looking for. And then below it we have our piece for our assessment that gives us feedback on the quiz itself, but we don't really care about that. What we want to do is create a new block so that we can have a component added inside of it. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this block here, and this is where it can kind of get tricky because there's a few things that we need to change in order for it to work. So I'm going to go Control C and copy that, and then right after this comma here, I'm going to paste that in. And right now, if we went to run this or to reload it, we would get a bunch of errors because a block cannot exist unless there's a component inside of it, and it has to be a component that has this block as a parent. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but you'll understand it once you try it out and do it. So what we want to do is we want to keep the parent ID the same because the parent ID is the page, so the article, and that's what we're going to keep. But we need to change the ID of this because it has to be unique. And as you can see, our ID down here is B110, so I might just put B107, even though that's not a far gap between them, just so that I can add a unique ID to this one. And then just change anything that goes along with it, so the title. And then I just want to make sure that all of the rest of this is good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save that piece. And in order to add a new question, I need to go to components. So we can see that our last component here is the one with the parent ID B106, and its ID is C142. If we scroll down to the last piece that is the assessment results, we can see that this one's ID is C150. So we have to pick something between, well, we should pick something between that range just to kind of stay in there. So I'm going to capture all the way from this open bracket down to this close bracket with a comma, and I'm going to copy that. And right after this comma, I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to paste that in. And in order for us to change this so that it works, I need to change the parent ID to the new one that we just created, and we called it B107 so that it has its own parent ID, or else if we kept it at 106 it would error out. And then I want to change the ID of this to something different, because if we didn't it would also error out. So I'm going to change that to 143, and I'm going to save that. And there's some other things that I might want to change, like, you know, that we changed in the last video. So the question attempts, I might change the selectable amount and so on and so forth. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to leave this as it is, and we're going to go and check and see if we have that extra question added. And maybe actually, so that we can see that we have it added, I'll just add 1, 2, 3 in front of the title and display title, just so that we can see the difference and see if it's added. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to go ahead and check on that. Now, one thing to note about this is that I don't have to do grunt build because I have Grunt Watch happening in my directory. And if you don't have Grunt Watch happening, every time you make a change and save it, you need to type grunt build into your command line in this directory so that you can see the updates. So now that I have it on watch, it just automatically runs the updates for me. So what I can do is I can refresh this page here, and I'm going to look for that question that has the 1, 2, 3 in it. And if you select this little progress meter up here, we'll be able to see that. So we can see all of the questions that we currently have in there, and you can see this new one that I added that has the 1, 2, 3. So we know that that works properly. Now I'm going to go back to Sublime Text and talk a little bit about deleting questions as well. And it's basically the same thing, but we're doing the whole process backwards. So I want to get rid of this whole question that I added in here. And what I need to do is I need to find the closing squiggly bracket that has the comma on it here. And then I need to go up to the very top one that opens it, and I need to delete that. So now that I have that deleted, I'm not going to be able to see any changes. It's going to error out because I still have a block component that was tied to that no longer has anything inside of it. So what I need to do is I also need to get rid of that block component as well. So I'm going to go back here, find the one that was tied to it, which has the ID of B107. I'm going to select from the squiggly opening bracket down into the closing one that also has the little comma dude down there. I'm going to delete that, and now, and I still have Grunt Watch going, so as I save it, it should update. If I reload this quiz, we should no longer have that 1, 2, 3 down there. You can see that. So that's the process that you're going to want to do to delete and add any of those extra additional questions.